So I'm glad I know that you know everybody. So dispense with the introduction.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Welcome back. Howard, I know we sent you up last time. Once it got up to the governor's office, tell us how all that went.
Interesting process at the governor's office, of course. I've been through it on the county court nomination the year before, 2 years before, I guess. Being quite honest with you all, I've known Judge Maltz for my whole 8 years post-Army. He was the guy I tried my very first case against when I got out of the military. And when I found out the two of us were nominated, and his connections politically, I was like, okay. Got it. But had a good conversation with the governor's general counsel and his staff, and talked to him about philosophy. And it's a very open, transparent process at that end, and I appreciate the opportunity that you all gave me last year to send me up there. I did the necessary politicking that I could, but given what I was up against, I don't know how many of you got to attend Judge Maltz's investiture, but when John Delaney and John Delaney both stood up to speak for him, I was sitting in the back going, okay, I understand.
Two good guys to know.
So, yeah, absolutely. And to be quite honest, it's one of the notes that I had written down. I've actually had the opportunity to appear in front of him a couple of times this year, and an outstanding judge. He and I had a conversation a couple of weeks ago, and we both had the same and reciprocal feelings the day the governor's office called us in December. His feeling, mine was, at the same time, I didn't get it, a little disappointment. At the same time, a little bit of that feeling of, wow, a little bit of relief as well. And he had the exact opposite, which, as he put it, was, dog catches car. Great, I just got what I asked for. What did I sign up for here? So, but I've had the opportunity to observe him in the last year, and his demeanor and his way of handling cases, and I think I've actually learned from that because of the way he has comported himself. But other than that, that's very interesting.
Howard, I'm sure you're aware this is a Volusia County suit.
I am.
This requires you to move from sunny Salt State down here. Why would you even want to do that?
Actually, my wife and I have considered it. I would probably end up moving myself at least temporarily. I have a daughter who's a sophomore in high school up there, has 2 more years, but that's my last child to get through school. And so I would probably end up having temporary quarters, if you were, down here until we found a place to resettle to. We've actually been looking at places out on the beach for years. It's been one of our dreams. So those are all contingencies at this point, but those are certainly practical considerations that we looked at.
Let me ask this. Do you feel that the judge should have a connection with the local community?
I believe that there is a certain amount of that, but the reason we have circuits in Florida that are larger than one county is because the law should be applied uniformly across a larger area, not just because you know the judges in the area or you know the lawyers in the area. We all know that old joke of the good lawyer knows the law, the great lawyer knows the judge. And although we all joke about it and we also all think a little bit that it's true, I think it is very important that judges be impartial and that they apply a law from a broader focus. We have a circuit that goes from Volusia to St. Johns County for a reason, and that's to make sure that the people in this area, this larger geographic area of the state, get treated the same.
How much of the practice is in Volusia County? You down here much in terms of case work?
I have not actually. I've had a few cases that have touched on it. I have a family law case right now just touching on it. But it's still St. John's case, but it's got Volusia players. But I have not had a lot of physical trial work down here. I haven't had a trial work. I've had some mediations down here.
You still represent the lawyer, former lawyer, I guess, at this point in St. Johns County?
No, that case terminated about 2-3 years ago.
Did you get out of the case before it got over?
No, it was finished. I was handling it. The issue that he had was a post-trial modification of divorce, and I was his second or third lawyer on that particular case, which usually says something about the case. But it was actually a very unique one proceedings, and I've had some dealings with the state attorney on a particular case. Actual day-to-day involvement in criminal, no, not since my military time. But as I mentioned in the application, or I believe I mentioned, the military rules of both evidence and procedure are very, very similar to Florida. And one of the things that I found actually very interesting when I got to the military, having studied Florida criminal procedure in law school, and then I got to the military, and the military was talking about, oh, we have all this full discovery, and I thought, yeah, so what? Everybody has full discovery. And then talked to my friends from other states and discovered that other states in criminal do not have the kind of discovery that we have here in Florida. So to me, it was a revelation in the flip side that the rest of the world wasn't as good as I thought we had. And the military was very similar to that. Thank you for the question.
As a military person, so I wasn't here last time.
Okay.
When you impressed everyone, you still got to impress me because I was out on maternity leave last time. But I'm thinking that as a military person, you're going to bring a certain amount of leadership to whatever position you're in. How do you see your leadership style and your style if you were chosen as a judge to lead the courtroom?
The style of leadership that is prevalent in the military today is definitely not what you see on TV. A leader has to first off be military technically and tactically proficient. So for a judge's standpoint, that would be technically proficient in the laws, the rules of procedure, and statutes. Tactically proficient is handling situations as they occur, being able to handle things on your feet, the kind of things that trial lawyers do, quite frankly. My leadership style is has evolved over the years to be somewhat, I don't want to say passive, because that makes it sound like I'm not in charge, but I don't walk into a room and attempt to take over on day one. A good commander in the military goes in, and the first thing you do is observe what's going on and pay attention. I think that's very true for the judge in the courtroom, although you have to be in charge of the process and make sure that the dignity of the courtroom is maintained, and that aspect. At the same time, it is the trial between these two parties. So it's not my job as judge, if I were sitting in that seat, to take over the case, but rather to be there and impose that leadership in a more persuasive, perhaps subtle, perhaps a little passive, it's not really the best word, as I said before, way in the courtroom. It's not to come in and, in the military, when somebody walks into the room, I can tell right away when I look at somebody in uniform, I see the stars or the rank insignia and all the stuff over their pockets and everything. And I can make somewhat of a determination of where they've been and what they've done. But beyond that, I have had the experience that the very best leaders are the ones that go in and observe first, watch what's going on, and then impose their will or their control in a little more subtle way than just simply say, I'm the judge here to do it. That being said, I've been in the courtroom when that's been necessary, and the judge has to be ready to do that, because there are times when people get out of control. Particularly I've seen in family law in the last year. I've done more of that family law cases where there's pro se litigants, and the judge just has to say, hang on a second, man, you need to stop right there. This is the way we're going to do things in this courtroom today. But you have to maintain that calm, persuasive control over the situation.
And I know that you acted as a general magistrate in the military. In that realm, were you required to deal with pro se litigants, or were they away with opinion counsel? How did that work out?
It was a little bit of both. In the search warrants, it was just like a search warrant here. You're typically talking to just the police and prosecution. In the case of the military, of a soldier who was put in pretrial confinement, they were given an opportunity for a defense counsel up front. In fact, the military could get one regardless of whether you can pay or not. But there were times when they would end up appearing at their pretrial confinement hearing, essentially pro se. And so I did have to deal with the pro se litigants.
How did you handle that?
You have the same way I did back then, which is you explain to them the rules of the procedure. Really the same drill that you do when the lawyers are present present because you can't, you don't want to pander to the accused in that case, but you want to make sure they understand the rules and that they understand what's going on. But at the same time, you have to keep that element of control over the process as well. You can't let them run away with it, which in a criminal case can happen as well.
I see that your practice right now is only about 3% family law cases.
Yeah, that actually, that statistic, I probably should have adjusted that number, probably more like about 20% as of the last 2 or 3 months, unfortunately. I've got a number of very active family cases. Family law kind of found me in the last year. I didn't go looking for it. I had one case a year ago that was a friend, a family friend, and that's why we took the case. I brought in a co-counsel who was very experienced in family law to be there with me. And then there have been 4 or 5 in the last 4 to 6 months now.
So it sounds like family law is not necessarily your comfort zone. What, and I understand that you brought in co-counsel, what other sort of mechanisms have you built into your practice so that you can be brought up to speed for that particular practice area?
Selective use of good reference books, 1 or 2. The Florida Bar Seal Manual on Family Law is a very good board book type law. Reading the statutes. With my 2 young lawyers that came with me, the former youth law firm, I'm constantly going back to them and I say, what have you researched on this particular point? And they say, well, I looked at this case and I looked at this form book and I said, you read the statute? What's the statute say? And particularly in family law where the elements, we had a big relocation issue, 12 relocation elements. I've got a support hearing in a week and a half. All the elements of support, imputed income issues, and they're all laid out in the statute. If you just start there, it's a really good place. But there's a couple of really good references, and then been quite willing to call more experienced attorneys who are not involved in the case and ask them to help out. In the courtroom, those are called the litigants to argue to you.
Time for reflection is always really important, and I know that after you probably met with us, there's probably some things that you said, I wish I had gotten a chance to share with them. This is your opportunity. Is there anything that you didn't tell us during the last meeting that you wish you had told us?
I'm fairly transparent. I can get up here and I can give a political song and dance, but I think what I am at heart, and I wrote down this note for myself, I call myself a law nerd, but I'm also a history student of history, and I understand that our law is the product of a long struggle between authority, the people, kings, parliaments, what have you. And I think I may have mentioned this last time, but even in the last year I've done more reading on this. Every time I look around, look at the experiences I've had in the military and having seen other systems where law failed. Law failed because they didn't have good judges and good lawyers. And they didn't have people that were willing to stand up and say, this is right and this is not right. Not my decision about what is right, but this is what the law says is right and is not right. And I think I've been even more convinced of that in the last year or so, in both my day-to-day practice and reading about the law and history and that sort of thing. I am a product of my upbringing. Yes, I have a military background, but for me that was 28 formative years that I can't and wouldn't have given up for the world. But they are who I am.
I know you through your pro bono service awards, and while I provide pro bono services for St. Johns County and for Jacksonville Area Legal Aid, I certainly have not provided as much pro bono legal services as you are. I want to highlight that, and I want you to let those that wouldn't know what that award is for one of the top attorneys giving the most pro bono service hours in a particular year. You've done that 3 times. Can you give us an idea of how many hours you were putting in for pro bono services?
My low estimate, because I didn't put these into my practice management system, which is a really bad way to run a law practice. I've got consumer part of the St. John's Legal Aid. But I've also done work with Jackson Ware and Legal Aid, which doesn't
Well, I mean,
necessarily
that
get
is St.
recorded,
John's County,
but it doesn't
right,
always get
yeah.
recorded to each
Right,
other.
right.
And been doing work with veterans as well. In fact, I've been asked to run the Florida Coastal's Veterans Clinic next semester. So we'll see how all that goes for them. And that'll be primarily representing clients, although I'll be paid to teach the students. The students will be representing pro bono clients that are veterans in need of assistance with their Veterans Affairs applications and appeals and that sort of thing. I think it's just very important. They're not always the most fun cases. Sometimes the most demanding clients, the ones that don't pay. But in the case of veterans, I've got one or two in mind that they absolutely need it. And there's no one out there that's able to help them right now. They can't afford an attorney. But they absolutely need the assistance.
I think Felicia, maybe from that is working on establishing a veterans court or a veterans program within the court system. Have you looked at how those are developing, and are you supportive of those? Are those effective?
There's two very interesting schools of thought on the notion of having a veterans court, and I haven't decided that I'm firmly on the fence on this one. I'll tell you why, because it's an important issue. Should we have separate courts for separate people depending on their status? That starts sounding like we're having different systems in place rather than treating everybody the same. Some of my friends have suggested that, should we have a Sharia court or something like that? And I think that's a far example of this. Should I treat a veteran differently in court? No. Should I have a pretrial diversion program that recognizes that a veteran may have certain psychological or socio-economic factors that have led him or her to where they are to encounter our court system, and should perhaps it be dealt with in a diversion program that way? Yes. That's the way Duval is running it. I've had friends that have approached the 7th Circuit, R.J. Larissa, to talk about doing that here, but I haven't met with him personally on that. Am I in favor of a diversion program in an appropriate fashion, similar to the way teen court is done or drug court is done? Sure, it's worth considering, but I don't want veterans to be singled out as either needing special treatment because there's something wrong with them. They're not injured. They're injured, or their service has impaired their ability to defend themselves. But am I in favor of looking at the diversion? Yes. It's an appropriate means of handling it.
Did you say you have 2 associate attorneys or 2 younger attorneys in your office?
I do.
Sort of a young attorney on this group. How has teaching them and training them been, and how would you maybe weigh, if you're a judge and you have an experienced, amazing litigant attorney in front of you and a very young new attorney? How do you balance the two? How do you shape the young attorney as a senior partner or as a judge?
A little differently depending on the role. As the partner in the law firm, as the owner of the law firm, I take mentoring them very seriously. I do give them tasks that at times I know the answer to. 98% of the time I don't know the answer. I think I know it. So I have them look at it, give me the details, brief me back, and then we talk about it. I really respect their judgment. The fact that they may be 20 years behind me in the law doesn't make them any less a lawyer, certainly not by the bar standards. And they have some great insight at times. In fact, many times it's great. Glad they're with me. As a judge, you have to be careful. You cannot put your thumb down on either side of the scale. I fight that tendency when I'm a mediator as well. You can't put your thumb down on either side of the scale. You can have a party that is struggling, and all you may be able to do is ask them a question to maybe help you make a decision or help them clarify what the issue is. In the military, we had something we don't do here in Florida. We can't do because of the way the appellate structure is set up. After a trial was over in the military, the judge loses control of the case. The minute a verdict is issued in the military, the trial judge loses all jurisdiction. And so we had something called Bridge the Gap, where literally right after the case, the judge would sit with the prosecutor and the defense counsel, and both had to be there, couldn't do it ex parte, and would critique us on what happened in the trial. You can't do that here because because the judge retains certain elements of jurisdiction, 10 days, 30 days, or if the appeals court sends it back. But that was a great thing. Can't reproduce that here, so I do that to a certain extent with my own attorneys now. After the hearing, okay, what could we have done differently? One of my senior lawyers once told me there's always 3 trials in every trial. The trial you wish you tried, the trial you actually tried, and the trial you had planned to try. 3 separate occurrences. So. Anyone else?
Did you ever get on the defense side at all in the military?
I had to try, in my last year, I was not officially assigned to defense. My last 2 years in the Army, I was the legal advisor to the Army Inspector General. And the Army IG has a very arcane system that they use where when an investigative file comes up, it's reviewed, legally reviewed by myself or by my deputy as the legal advisor. And then it went to the Inspector General for a decision. The problem was the defense counsel was not allowed to see the file. And so, although it was never officially assigned to me as a task to review it from a defense perspective, I always was very aware of the fact we would get a submission by defense counsel, and I knew they had not seen all of the evidence. They were not allowed, because of the Privacy Act, to see certain pieces of the evidence. One of the most important things is who made a statement. The fact that a person made a statement would be redacted, so you would have no context. I felt I had to look at the file, not just as the advisor to the Inspector General, but as the advisor to the process, since I had access to both sides of the information, and not make the defense argument, but make balanced arguments to the reviewer. I had one other time post-military where I represented a family member in a military court proceeding as well. We ended up dealing the case out as happens there as often as in the civilian side. But that was the only defense time per se.
Prior to your coming back out of military practice, we've had some judges who had some extensive military experience and been stopped and they may have some robitis because of their military background and sort of rank and forth in my way. What can you do to avoid that?
One of the officers I respected the most in the military when he was promoted to brigadier general said that at his promotion ceremony, when they put a star on my shoulder, it didn't make me any smarter, it just made me more dangerous. I mentioned earlier my feeling of relief when the governor's office said, thanks but no thanks. I think I look at the judiciary exactly that way. I would not be putting on the road to impose my will. In fact, I see it more of the referee, the peacekeeper, the decision maker, but not imposing my will on the outcome. And I'm not built that way. Would I say that at times I will look a lawyer in the face and say, please sit down, Mr. So-and-so? I know that will happen, or Ms. So-and-so. I know that will happen because they'll deserve it, but it won't happen because of having to go on the right road if asked for it in that case. That's a great question. I appreciate that.
Will you tell anyone that they can't handle the truth?
Actually not a bad movie in the grand scheme of things, because it shows the advocacy of the 2 sides, and it does show in that case how the judge in the end, although a lot of people thought he was just sitting back and being very passive, the judge, the military judge that's portrayed in that case, I think actually they did a very good job. Jack Nicholson turns to him and says, "Is this how you run your operation?" And the judge is like, answer the question, be quiet, that kind of thing. He didn't have to impose himself, but he did in that case. But yeah, no, I'm not Jack Nicholson, no, for sure.
Well, Howard, thank you. We will be finishing up our deliberations on again today and tomorrow, and we will let everyone know.
Thank you very much. Appreciate everybody's time.
Thank you.
It looks like it takes 2 days out of your schedule.